Good evening, everyone who's listening via Zoom. Um, last time we met, in fact, the last two times we met, we had a discussion on a study that I'd done called Victorious Christian Living, and we got a little bit bogged down on something that we had a hard time agreeing about. And that was a statement I made in the study about the body is morally neutral. And we batted that around quite a bit, and it got a little bit, I don't know how to describe it, but we were having trouble agreeing. Since that time, though, in fact, yesterday, was it yesterday?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Dave and I got together on the phone, and we had a wonderful time talking about several things, this being one of them. And I think the way David expressed it to me yesterday made a lot of sense to me, and I think we're not really very far apart in our understanding of it. And if we have time later on during this session, I think maybe we can talk a little bit about it toward the end of the class period, if that's all right.
Yeah.
We had a few more thoughts, but we have quite a bit to cover in this chapter 17 on contract verbs. So I'd like to do that first. Is that, you have something?
Yeah, I'd like to say perhaps sometimes our discussions get a little heated, but it says to sharpen as iron sharpens iron. And sometimes maybe there's a few sparks that are flying, but we are of the same purpose.
Yeah.
And that's to file off our own rough edges. And I know I have a lot of them, and I thank you for your patience, Carl.
I'll do
and So in the charity of that God gives us and the grace that God gives us, we're brothers, and we have far, far, far more in agreement, and everything that's really important, we are in complete agreement about. And we'll see what we can say later. But I just wanted to emphasize that.
Well, I wanted to also tie that in with what happened Tuesday in our men's Bible study. Rob brought up that passage in 2 Corinthians 5, I believe it is, talking about the thorn in the flesh. No, that wasn't chapter 5. Paul's thorn in the flesh that he asked the Lord 3 times to remove, and the Lord said, no, my grace is sufficient for you. And the discussion that followed that was wonderful, in my opinion, because God does bring thorns or tribulations or pressures to bear in each of our lives. And the tendency we all have is to want to get out from under that, but God has purposes for it, and good purposes. Sometimes it's just like our sparks that fly when metal sharpens metal. Heat is produced and pressure, and that can result in very beneficial results. And I think it is. I love our brothers here that get together every week who we have the purpose of living in a way that brings honor to the Lord, walking worthily of our calling, and God is going to use us in each, he already has used each of us in each other's lives, and that's always beneficial. In my experience, even in marriage, I don't think any two people on the face of this earth ever agree doctrinally on every issue, even married couples. And it's, in my opinion, a way to help us to be understanding. In the case of marriage, we're to live with our wives in a way of understanding, which literally means according to knowledge. And in Ephesians 3, it has the use of the word unity 2 times. The unity of the Spirit, which is a supernatural unity that God has formed between each member of the body, which we're to maintain. We don't create it. But then in verse 13, it says, until we all come to the unity of the faith. That unity has not been attained yet and probably won't be in this lifetime because we don't agree on every point of doctrine now.
Well said, Carl.
So, all right. Contract verbs, chapter 17, page 171 in our book. In this chapter, you will learn the peculiarities of verb stems ending in either alpha, epsilon, or omega, the 5 basic rules governing the contraction of vowels, and the difference between transitive and intransitive verbs. The word transitive means transferring the action of the verb to a direct object, and intransitive means it does not do that.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
So we're learning about contract verb. Oh, I'm sorry. We're learning about contract verbs, it says in the title. And I just am curious about the, we're also learning about verbs ending in alpha, eta, and omicron.
Yes.
And does that imply, are those just 2 separate things? I mean, those vowel endings, the contract verbs end in those vowels.
Those are the only, no, wait a minute, I can't say that. Those are by far the most common, those 3, the most common of the vowels that, the ending vowel of the stem of the verb. Let's look, before we get into the text of the book, at the end of the chapter in the vocabulary section, page 178. This lists several of these contract verbs. The first one on page 178 is agapao, and the stem, if you look to the right, his notation is to use an asterisk to point out the stem of the vowel verb. Agapa, it ends in alpha. So this is what we call an alpha contract. The third word there is zeteo. That's an epsilon contract. The stem is zeta, eta, tau, epsilon.
So the term contract verb has to do with contraction.
That's right.
Okay, it's not like another tense like present active indicative.
Oh, you're right. Okay. That's not the name of the tense. I was here
wondering if these are verbs used in contract.
It's a very, it's an odd name, isn't it? Because contract in English,
contraction.
Well, you could say contractible verbs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Contract.
But we shorthand contract.
All right. Well, I'm thinking it meant you had a contract. I mean,
same here. I was like, you use these only if you're writing a contract. And
thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Paleo, 4th one down, is another epsilon contract. The stem is kappa, alpha, lambda, epsilon, and then this funny little upsilon with a caret underneath. He will explain that. That's called a digamma, but let's wait until he explains it. Next one is la leo, another epsilon contract. Stem is la le. And then on the next page, playrao. That's an omicron contract. Stem is playra. I should have probably told you what the meaning of these words were, but this means I fill or complete or fulfill. Poieo, another epsilon contract. I do or I make. And te reo. There are about 4 or 5 epsilon contracts. Te reo means I keep, guard, or observe. Going back, agapao means I love. We're familiar with agape, which is a noun form. Zeteo means I seek, desire, or try to obtain. Kaleo means I call, name, or invite. And by the way, ekklesia comes from that same verb, ek, and kaleo, to call out. That's what the church is, called out assembly. So, all right, those are our contract vowels, and in succeeding chapters, he'll introduce a few more. Any questions so far? All right. Contract verbs are verbs whose roots end in alpha, epsilon, or omicron, footnote 1. The usual definition for contract verbs is that they have stems ending in a vowel. While this is true, it's also confusing. The verb akuo has a stem ending in what appears to be a vowel, but it is not a contract verb. Actually, the final upsilon in akuo reflects an old letter called digamma that has long since dropped out of the Greek alphabet. It was replaced in most cases by an upsilon, but because it was a digamma, the upsilon does not contract. Okay, he'll have more to say about the digamma in a little while. So that's sort of an exception, you might say. Contract verbs follow the standard rules for verbs, but there is one additional point to learn. When the final vowel comes in contact with the connecting vowel, the two vowels contract. Footnote 2. This is the same phenomenon you saw with case endings. The genitive singular case ending, second declension, is actually omicron. It contracts with the omicron of the noun stem to form lago plus omicron, and it changes to lagu. So the two omicrons combine or contract to form omicron upsilon. Okay, back to what we were reading. And often forms a different vowel or diphthong. For example, poie, the epsilon there, plus the omicron of the case, no, poie, the connecting vowel, epsilon, and the omicron contract to form an omicron upsilon, or human.
Okay.
Poiumen. It kind of, if you run it together, poiumen, it's poiumen. Contract verbs are categorized according to their final root vowel. In the case of poieo, it would be epsilon. That's the final root vowel. What is encouraging about contract verbs is that all alpha contracts behave similarly, as do all epsilon and all omicron contracts. In other words, all contract verbs with roots ending in a form in alpha form their different inflected endings the same way. Once you learn the forms of agapao, you know the inflected patterns of all other alpha contracts. Now, I'm going to show you something in the appendix section that will make things easier for you. At least I find it easier. Page 418 in the appendix section. All these pages that have gray edges. Here's a chart of all the possible vowels that can contract. The top section is for single vowels, contracting with single vowels. The bottom section is single vowels contracting with diphthongs.
So, in reading this, is it so the
page 418.
I mean, so in the single vowels, let's look at so alpha, and then so the next one is alpha eta. So that should I read that as meaning when alpha's has an eta following it, it becomes alpha? Is that what this is saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me say it a different way though. The first alpha in the headings of the rows, when it connects with an alpha, the heading of the first column,
you get a single alpha.
You get an alpha. In other words, it doesn't change it.
Right.
If you have an alpha as the stem vowel, or he called it root vowel, connecting with an epsilon of the ending, it also becomes an alpha.
And that's a single alpha.
That's a single alpha. Yeah. Let's take the example that he shows us, poieo. in 17.1, what we just read. Poie, the epsilon there, you find the epsilon in the heading of the second row. See that? And then you combine it with the omicron, the first letter of the ending. And so there it is, the second last one on the second row. It becomes oo, which is what we just saw. This is, in my opinion, the easiest way, because what he's going to present in the next page or two, to my way of thinking, is a more complicated way. But we'll go through it and you form your own opinion.
Yeah.
My money is on Dad agreeing with you.
I'm already nodding in agreement. All right. Just from historical observation.
Okay.
I'm not betting.
Why don't we have somebody else read here?
Okay. Sure. Starting at 17.3.
Right.
Contract verbs are common, and you need to be able to figure out what vowels lead to a specific contraction. If you cannot, you will not be able to discover the lexical form of the verb, and thus its meaning. For example, if you find the form poiete, pardon me.
Poieta.
Oh, close. Okay, poieta. No?
Yeah, poieta.
Poieta. Okay, thank you. Oh, I see. Circumflex of a second.
Yeah.
Poieta.
Yeah.
The A is going to cause problems unless you recognize that A can be the result of the contraction of two epsilons. Then you can see that poieta is second person plural of an epsilon contract verb. That is, it's the result of poie and eta being that second person.
He's going backwards. Ending. He's got the arrow pointing to the left. So let's go forwards now. Poie, let's find the epsilon in the heading of the row. That's the second row.
So that's a present active indicative ending. It's a second person plural, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then the eta.
Is that in the blue thing?
It is.
So we look for where epsilon crosses epsilon, and we get A.
I'm sorry, Carl. I was showing him where it is.
Oh, does he have it there?
He does in the blue cheat sheet. Yes, it's on the third page.
Okay.
And near the top, there's the indicative chart. And he has luo, luesue, but so you can see the endings there. Ace, a, omen, ete, usi. And he's color coded it. Looks like he has like the ending vowel and then the. I forget what the red part of we call it.
That's this case ending.
Case ending.
No, that's nouns. The verb ending. So is that the right term? Okay.
Second person plural epsilon, tau, epsilon, et. Are we looking at the same thing?
I don't think I'm looking. You're looking at this?
I'm not seeing it either.
Indicative luo right there follows the endings that were just being discussed. If you look down
the column of luo there, you would see luomen, luete.
Okay. That's the verb luo, which is not a contract verb though.
Right, but ete, that ending there is the ending for second person plural present and present active indicative, right?
Yeah.
And he's highlighted that out of the word. I guess, sorry. It's not in isolation.
No, that's all right. I think this is actually less helpful to me than the start.
Well, I'm sorry. Oh, wait, actually, there's a master personal ending chart too on the previous page.
Yeah, that's actually more helpful to me.
In parenthesis, he has the endings. So he has nothing, sigma, iota, men, te, and I don't know how much you love that either because it doesn't have the vowels, but
that's a different. You've got a different one than I have.
Do we? Oh, oops. Okay. I'm definitely not helping you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there was something back on another page that showed just those endings that I've been looking at.
Okay.
Helpful, but in chapter 16,
I made a copy of that chart in the appendix.
On page
to keep-
163 is the one I was looking at. Zach.
163.
Mhm.
It shows the actual. I think that's the one. No, that's
Yeah.
not. That's not showing. That's showing.
That's
Oh,
Luo.
never mind. That's what they ended up contracting. They're not contracting, but I don't know how to say what they ended up doing. But
They have the connecting vowel and the personal ending. listed
Yeah.
below.
yeah, that actually is the personal ending. That's
So-
the personal endings with the connecting vowels.
In
Yeah.
the chart, he highlights the connecting vowel as blue,
As blue,
and then
yeah.
the personal ending is red.
That's red, and that's harder for me to. I'm just going. I can't see that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay.
It's a better blue than in the textbook, in my opinion.
This is,
Yeah.
I made a copy of this chart here to keep handy when I do translation. You might want to do the same
I'm
thing.
just going to peek what you do.
That's from this
Oh,
page
of the vowel
418.
contractions, so that as you see them, you can
Oh,
parse out.
That's the one
That's a great
Yeah,
idea.
from the
That
appendix.
one is in the appendix.
Once you keep that, I don't.
No. I have the book. I can copy it.
Before
off the
it came,
appendix,
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll copy it by hand and then I'll have some shot. I won't remember
Okay.
it, but it's better.
You
for
can
my brain.
Xerox it from the book.
It's better for my brain.
Xerox. Oh my gosh.
All right.
I need to be ready to write Codex Sinaiticus, like that level of scribal work. I'm just kidding.
Okay. You want to continue, Zach?
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. for getting that
Also,
up. Can you direct me back to our page?
Yeah.
I flipped back to that.
17.3,
Thank
page
you.
172, third paragraph.
Often you will discover that several vowel combinations could have given rise to the same contracted form. Uh-oh. For example, oo is formed from the contractions of eta, omicron,
That's
eta,
epsilon.
epsilon. I'm sorry.
I did the same thing.
I flipped them. Okay, my bad.
Eta is the long
Yeah,
vowel.
it's eta,
Epsilon
right.
is a short vowel.
Epsilon, omicron, omicron, epsilon, and omicron. If you see poiumen, the connecting vowel and personal ending are omicron, mu, epsilon, nu.
Mhm.
But is its lexical form poieo or poieu?
Poiao.
Poiao.
Yeah. In other words,
Oh,
is it
yeah,
an epsilon
poiao,
contract or an omicron contract?
Because it could definitely. Okay, I
Well,
see the
yeah.
problem.
So it'll be one or the other, right?
One or the other.
I mean,
Only
you'll find-
vocabulary memorization or a lexicon can answer that question.
Yeah. And if you learn these
You can
vocabulary words well, I
Yeah.
think he listed 7 different contract verbs.
Okay.
And if you learn
For the vocab in this
if-
chapter.
yeah, like poieo, it's never poiao.
Yeah.
It's poieo. And so learn those contract verbs well and pronounce them with the ending.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Chapter 17.
Continue then, top of page 173.
You meet contractions only in 2 tenses, the present and the imperfect.
Yeah.
Sorry. In the other tenses, the contract vowel lengthens and there is no contraction, but more about this later. Having said this, I do not want to overstate the significance of understanding contractions. While knowing that vowels formed the contraction what vowels form the contraction is important for discovering the lexical form of the word, in most cases, it is not significant for parsing. For example, can you parse the following forms, person and number, even if you do not know what vowels form the contraction?
Let's see the
The
uman.
first one looks like third person plural.
Uman? No,
Uman.
that's first person plural. The men ending.
Yeah.
I was thinking we'd see. Yeah. Uh-oh. Well, apparently I can't. So
Yeah.
maybe I have some remedial work to.
The uta of the next one, see the tau epsilon? What
Yep.
does that suggest?
Maybe second person plural.
That's right. And agapas,
That looks like first person singular. Maybe no, second person singular.
I think
No,
so.
that's the
Yeah,
iota sigma.
yeah. That's
There's an iota subscript
remember
there.
luo, lues, lue.
Mhm.
The only one that ends with sigma is the second singular.
Right, and I see an iota subscript, so that
Yeah.
feels confirming too.
Yeah.
Poyo.
Poyo.
Hmm.
Luo, Lue, Slue.
Probably the
First singular.
person.
Yeah.
And
I'm looking at the
Agapusi, that's third person.
That's right.
Movable name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that was the one.
Now I know how to use this chart.
Okay. Yeah. So you're not going to have trouble, I don't think, parsing any of these that have contractions because they're so similar to what we already learned with Luo.
Of course.
Yeah.
I would hate to prove you wrong.
Okay. Rules on contraction, footnote 3. Some teachers prefer to teach the rules moving from the uncontracted form to the contracted. For example, when epsilon and epsilon contract, they form epsilon iota. If you want to learn the rules this way, they are given in the advanced information, which they are, and I do prefer to go in that forward direction. Page 180, 17.11 through 17.12. He shows it in the forward direction. And but that's essentially what's contained in this chart.
Yeah.
And this chart is just, in my opinion, the simplest way to understand all that he presents here. I don't know if I even want to take the time to read them, except that he does have these 5 rules. Of the 7 rules, the first 5 are the most important.
Yeah, this is actually logical in my mind.
Yeah. For instance, he says U is formed from epsilon omicron, omicron epsilon, and omicron omicron. He already said that before. But if you want to turn around in the forward direction, epsilon omicron, omicron epsilon, and omicron omicron form omicron upsilon. So you can restate it in the forward direction if you want to. But whichever works for you. And then I'm going to state all of these 5 rules in the forward direction. Epsilon plus epsilon becomes epsilon iota. Well, it's hard to, but if you look at the chart, the last row, starting with omega as the heading, almost all of those form from a contraction of omega with anything else. Either is simply omega, or omega with the iota subscript, or omega upsilon, which is a diphthong that we've not seen before. So, but he says omega is formed from almost any combination of omicron or omega with any other vowel except for rule 1.
What?
So if you have an omicron or an omega going into combining with anything, except for double omicron or omicron with epsilon, then
I think you've said that.
It becomes omega.
So if you're okay with not wading through all of his backwards explanation, I'm okay with it too.
Omicron iota becomes omicron iota.
You can read it on your own later, and if it helps you, then fine.
Yeah, that's all right. I mean, omicron iota becomes omicron iota. It doesn't seem like a contraction, but okay.
Which one are you looking at?
The vowel contractions on 418.
Okay.
I'm just, some of these are actually don't contract. I mean, they're just what you would expect.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So as we get into the exercises, use this chart,
Yeah.
and I think you'll be
Yeah.
just fine. Okay, 17.6. This is where he gives us the paradigm of all three of the possible contract verbs using agapao for the alpha contract, poieo for the epsilon contract, and plerao for the omicron contract. Agapao means I love, poieo means I do or I make, and plerao means I fill or fulfill. The contracting vowels are listed in parentheses. Work through the paradigm explaining all the contractions. Well, it's just, for example, look at the first one. Agapo is the result of alpha plus omega contracting. Or if you look on this chart, alpha on the left,
he's kind of giving it to us.
Omega on the top becomes omega, which is what he said. Now, one other little point here is that when the contraction occurs, the accent will be a circumflex, always. And so when you see an inflected form with a circumflex on the connecting vowel, you might suspect that it's the result of contraction.
Okay, he didn't show that in his table. He doesn't show the accent.
Oh, no, the table doesn't say that, but I think he says it somewhere in the text.
It's okay. It's just I'm not sure why the table doesn't show us that, since that's the case. But
well, the table doesn't show the
accents,
the accent, because
sorry.
This table is a universal table of contractions. It works not only with verbs.
So this rule with the accent is for verbs.
This rule.
So we're seeing that there's always the circumflex accent on these, but you're saying that's only true for verbs.
I think that's true.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I know it is true for
verbs.
These verbs, which represent all the possible contract verbs.
Okay.
So.
Yep.
Oh, he says it in 17.7. There will almost always be a circumflex over the contracted vowels in the present indicative. Oh, in the imperfect tense, which is the only other tense that has contractions, that might not always be true, that the circumflex is over the contracted vowel. We'll have to wait till chapter 1 to see if that's true. But in the present tense, it is true.
Okay.
The endings are nearly the same as you have seen with non-contract verbs like luo, even when a contraction has not taken place. The omicron is the first person singular ending, which lengthens to omega. The sigma is still present for the second person singular ending. The plural endings are virtually the same. Concentrate on the similarities. Now, as we start learning more about the verbs, the different kinds of verbs in the present tense, we'll be on the present tense until we get to chapter 21. The temptation will be to forget that we might be dealing with a contract verb. There are other types of verbs that are not contract verbs, which don't have this contraction thing to worry about. But this chapter is focusing on contract verbs. But as we get farther along, I'll try to point that out.
So just to make sure I'm tracking how this works correctly. Agapao.
Mm-hmm.
Agapao think I'm saying that right.
Yeah, you are.
So that is the first person singular. So second person singular, taking the vowel ending epsilon, and then the connecting vowel epsilon, and then the personal ending iota sigma. So we're adding epsilon iota sigma to alpha, which would mean it would be agapos, and that's alpha with an iota subscript.
I think if I tracked with you, I think that's true. It's got the iota. Yes, yes, that's true. It's the alpha of the ending of the stem, or root, he calls it sometimes. Plus the epsilon iota sigma. The alpha plus the epsilon becomes alpha with an iota subscript.
Alpha plus epsilon with the iota. Right.
That's a diphthong. Epsilon iota.
Becomes
there you go.
Alpha with the iota subscript.
There it is. It's that second column. Alpha contracted with epsilon iota.
Oh, wait, now I'm confused because he's got two options there.
Yeah. Genuine and spurious.
Oh, no.
We almost never run into spurious diphthongs because, well, it's almost always going to be that first column.
Okay, so now he's talking about whether it's formed by a contraction or not, but this is formed by a contraction, right?
Yeah.
But isn't this whole thing about contractions? So
it is.
What do those parentheticals even mean? I'm sorry. Yeah.
A genuine diphthong is a diphthong not formed by a contraction. Well,
where are you at?
Oh, I think he's saying whether that epsilon iota, if itself was formed by a contraction. So basically it's a contraction with a contraction.
Yeah, it's a double
like a
contraction.
double contraction. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry.
But we have
for Luke at first.
With the second person singular, which is epsilon iota sigma ending.
Yes.
That diphthong epsilon iota was not formed by a contraction.
Got it. So it is a genuine diphthong.
It's a genuine diphthong.
So we should have the iota subscript.
Yeah.
Okay. So it is. So second person singular, present active indicative of agapao would be alpha, gamma, alpha, p, alpha, iota subscript, sigma.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You having trouble with that chart?
Yeah, I didn't know what you were talking about. I was looking at the text back in chapter 17. I couldn't figure out what you were talking about.
These two columns here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I see the columns.
Second and third column. He's got footnote 1 for the first one, which is a genuine diphthong. That epsilon iota is an example of that is second person singular in the ace ending. That is a genuine diphthong. It's not a spurious diphthong.
So a spurious diphthong would be a first contraction.
Yeah, but we're not going to run across any spurious diphthongs.
That would be if you have that epsilon iota itself that's being contracted with the alpha. If that epsilon iota was itself the result of a contraction.
It's all right. Yeah. So why is 3 just spurious? What does that mean?
What does spurious mean?
Well, by itself. I'm sort of wondering.
I think he means that it's the same thing as footnote 2.
Spurious diphthong?
Yeah, I think he's saying that.
Then why is it a different number? It should have been the same one. I'm not sure why spurious all by itself would mean anything.
Well, spurious means not genuine.
Well, okay. We're assuming that footnote 3 is the same thing as footnote 2.
Oh, where's
see, there's
a 3. I didn't notice that. Okay, that omicron upsilon is an example of a spurious diphthong. And I don't know where
Well,
that's used. I don't remember running
understand, but
across.
why do we need a footnote? Because are not all of the diphthongs, sorry, are there any diphthongs formed? So is the omicron upsilon in the columns above it for omicron and omicron. That's also spurious. I mean, he doesn't footnote all the spurious diphthongs. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't understand
I
that either.
don't know what he's talking
Yeah. I think use the part of the chart that
makes sense.
that you're going.
Yeah.
You're not going to have any examples of spurious diphthongs in what we're doing
I'm
now.
not sure that I'm going to care. Let me ask you this question. We still pronounce them the same way.
Hmm.
Do we pronounce a spurious diphthong the same way we pronounce a genuine diphthong?
I suppose so.
Okay, I'm just
Yeah.
so I'm not sure there's any practical difference when we run across them.
Just talking about whether you put the Otis subscript there or not. I think
Yeah, that's all.
But I'm not going to compose this stuff, right?
Right. No, we're translating, not composing.
I'm not a Byzantine philologist. Sorry.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
We're not adding
We can
subscripts.
continue. Yeah.
Okay, let's skip down to transitive and intransitive verbs,
Okay.
17.10. You want to read, Dave, for a little bit?
I'm sorry, where are we? 17.10.
10.
I'll try. Verbs are transitive or intransitive. A transitive verb is one that carries the force of its action over to an object. In other words, transitive verbs require a direct object.
Ferrata moi auton oda.
Yeah. Bring him here to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So bring is a transitive verb. And the direct object of that transitive verb is him. What is the subject of the intransitive verb? Since this is a command.
Yeah, it's implied to be you.
Implied you, yeah.
Yeah. All right. An intransitive verb does not carry its action over to an object. There may be other modifiers present, but there will not be a direct object.
Okay. Lege auto akaluthe moi kai anastas ekalutheisen auto.
He said to him, "Follow me," and he rose and followed him. And
okay, the word rose
yeah,
should be underlined.
Yeah, that's what he is. Anastas.
Anastas. Yeah. Well, there is no direct object.
Right.
You might attempt to approximate it by saying he raised himself up.
Yeah, he rose himself.
But yeah.
Which sounds really odd.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus raised himself from the dead. Well, not, I mean, yes. I mean,
yeah, he did.
He did. I mean, the Father raised him, but he gave himself his life.
But in the English form of that verb, it's raised, not rose.
That's right. It's odd. It's a very odd usage.
Yeah. So that's all. It's
okay. So it's really just whether it requires a direct object or not. You can't say right. So the word bring or to bring in the English requires a direct object, or it's nonsensical.
Yeah. It's incomplete.
I think. Yeah.
Bring me.
So it has no
well, I'm actually then I'm the object. Bring me. I'm saying you bring me.
Bring me a Coke.
Yeah, right.
But actually, that's an indirect object. Bring to me a Coke. The Coke is the direct object.
Right. I know the Coke is the direct object.
We didn't talk about indirect objects in this.
You bring Coke to me. So, to me is the indirect object.
So in this example here, bring him to me. The me is the indirect object.
Right.
But we weren't talking about. You still have it.
I was just saying, if you just said in English, if you just said bring me, that would actually be the command, you bring me. But that I was trying to make an example that didn't really work. But
well, bring me home.
bring me home, right? Then I'm the
then
direct
I'm the
object.
direct object.
Yeah, you bring me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Me
Yeah.
is the direct object to it.
Okay, I think we've pretty much covered it
That's
here.
kind of yeah. I'm trying to be too stubborn.
I'm very tired
Oh,
tonight.
he does have something here about the digamma on page 181, 17.13.
All right.
The digamma, which is the first upsilon with the little caret symbol under it, was a letter in the Greek alphabet that dropped out of use before the Koine period. In most cases, it was replaced by an upsilon. It is written in grammars as either upsilon with a little caret under it, or that funny shaped thing that looks like an F with a slanted vertical, or two gammas written kind of on top of each other, a capital gamma. It was pronounced wa, or as a W, and originally came between the epsilon and zeta in the alphabet. Its name, double gamma, came from its shape. It is classified as a semi-consonant. So the way you would pronounce that, I would suppose, is wow. The wa of the digamma plus the diphthong ow.
Yeah, okay, wow.
Wow.
Okay.
The fact that it used to be part of the language explains some of what appears to be irregularities in the language. For example, the root of akuo is actually a ku with a digamma as the last vowel there. When the digamma dropped out of use, it was replaced by upsilon, but the fact that it used to be a digamma explains why there is no contraction with the omega. I discussed the digamma in more detail in more morphology of biblical Greek.
I'm sorry. So is this something that's reflected in the table on 418 somehow?
About the digamma?
Yeah.
Not that I know of, because digamma doesn't.
Well, we have this discussion, but I'm a little bit wondering. So, are we gonna come across this thing?
Well, the verb akuo, man.
Or akuo, yeah, we'll be using akuo.
Learned in the previous chapter.
But akuo you might think it's a contract verb, but it's not.
But we didn't use the digammas. Did we? Did we add that funny squiggle underneath?
No, he's providing an explanation of verbs that won't follow the contraction.
Yeah.
So we will never run across the digamma. We run across the koine dropping of it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right. There are two letters that dropped out, possibly more, but the two that he talks about in the book is the this digamma and then the consonantal iota. If you remember
that, but I
don't honestly. Those are classified as semi-consonants. And if you think about it, W in our language is sort of like partly a vowel and partly a consonant.
Right.
But in the Koine, we don't pronounce it the way he just suggested.
We don't, it doesn't exist in there.
Well, yeah, I mean, it became an upsilon, and we don't do this business here. We don't contract it, but we don't pronounce it with the W sound.
No, we don't.
Right. It's just got the upsilon.
As far as I know, there's no words in Koine Greek that have the W sound.
Yeah. Interesting.
It is funny that it's a double gamma. I mean, it's funny because we have double U.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a similar concept, seemingly in the end, even in the
in fact,
shape of the thing.
I don't know. Well, that's as much as I think we ought to read in the textbook tonight.
Can I well, I could ask you after class. I was just trying to follow this and parse out what would be all the endings of agape. Or not agape, but
didn't we have that here?
Yeah. Didn't he give us
So
the
we
whole
have that, don't we? Yeah, right
paradigm?
here.
Did he give us the whole
He
paradigm?
gave us the
On
whole
page
paradigm, yeah.
176, isn't it?
Oh, I'm losing it. There it is at the top. I just didn't see
Okay.
that. Okay, my bad. Never mind.
You-
Thank you.
We could, if you want, read the paradigm together. Agapo, agapas, agapa, agapomen, agapata, agaposi, aposine,
Uh-huh. And then
poio, poies, poie, poiumen, poieta, poiusen. It's so similar to luo.
Right.
Take
Right.
play role, play royce, play roy, play rumen, play ruta, play rusi.
Yeah.
It's so similar, you're not going to have trouble recognizing.
Yep.
I don't think.
Some of this is getting in, I'm actually, some of this is getting in my head.
Yeah.
I'm really tired tonight, but I'm able to
I need to do a little remedial memorization work on those present active indicative personal endings.
Yeah.
Like keep mixing them up, and that's gonna trip my head.
Well, here's something that might help you.
It shouldn't be that bad. It's really not that much information
it's
relative to like case endings.
Yeah, that was all actually a lot more. But wait till we get to the other forms of the verbs.
Oh, I'm sure it's gonna get in.
I'm looking at this and look at all these prefixes. That's what's gonna really be nightmare.
Yeah.
Well, they're all eta, I guess, aren't they? And look. And then look, but
Okay. Here's something that I find helpful.
Yeah.
On page 230.
Okay.
230.
This takes the verb luo in the present tense and the imperfect tense, which we won't get to until chapter 21. But the one that we learned so far is the top left quadrant: luo, lues, lue, luomen, lueta, and luusi.
Okay.
And he gives the inflected form there, but he lists the true personal ending next to it. And as we get more tenses, we'll fill in this quadrant. And this is probably the best thing to memorize. If you're going to memorize paradigms for verbs, memorize.
Because we'll recognize those endings.
Yeah. This will be so similar to contract verbs that you won't have any trouble.
So there's primary and secondary tenses. I don't know what that term means, but I assume we'll learn it.
We will learn it in chapter 21.
So
active versus middle and passive.
So yeah, I remember this now.
A grouping improvement.
The ending for, I don't even know how to say that, nsi, as opposed to sin.
Nsi.
No, nsi.
Yeah.
Instead of sin, because we'll never actually see it as
the new drops out because of the sigma.
Right. So it's see or sin is what we'll actually see on the verb.
That's right.
Which is why this kind of charts are
sigma.
Yeah, the omicron upsilon there in luusi came because it was it rubbed up against the sigma and got lengthened from omicron to u.
Yeah. There's a few other spots here, so like say middle passive or similar things where
we'll learn about that soon.
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, we've got a half hour left. Do you want to talk about anything else?
Not from the chapter. I'm good, I think.
Okay. Well,
I'm happy that I'm not. I don't feel like I'm swimming. I feel like I'm drowning. I'm swimming. I'm treading water. I'm swimming in a sea of information, but I'm treading water.
I think you are too, Zach. I mean, from your comments and questions, I think you. I know you don't have enough time right now with your construction and your job and your family to keep up with us like you want to, but You're not falling behind, I don't think.
Thank
Far-
you. Yeah,
You're far more charitable than I'm sure Bill Mouse would be in his class.
Oh man, well, I'm glad I'm not. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure if I was in a seminary class, they'd be like, "You need to get serious or go home." But I appreciate your letting me drag along.
The way I look
It's
at
not
it,
you, though. We all are.
we
I
have
am.
the luxury of going at our own speed.
Yes, true.
And in my opinion, my experience, I should say, our son took first year Greek, and I think they spent a whole lot less time than we did.
Oh,
And they didn't do all the exercises like we're doing.
right.
And
I wonder how they managed.
they
I mean,
went so fast that I'm sure most of them forgot half of it before they got
it's a
done.
lot of.
I think that's the
memorization.
case. Probably most people who get degrees.
I had trouble memorizing all of this, and really,
Right.
I think, I mean, honestly, my objective is probably somewhat lesser than I had hoped for starting the class, seeing the complexity of the things to know.
Mhm.
I'm going to be happy to be able to recognize some of it, a lot of it, and then when I'm looking at an interlinear,
Mhm.
right,
I have
to go and look it up in a lexicon and deal with understanding.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to look at a raw Greek document and go translate it with no help.
No.
It's
I
just
have
not
to-
going to happen.
I have to use all kinds of crutches too.
One thing that might become accessible is like critical texts of the Greek New Testament, for instance. So like I wonder
Yeah.
if this is something that you've experienced. So like you could probably look at like Nessie Allen and understand like the critical information about manuscripts, for instance, because you understand enough about the language.
Yeah, I'm able to get
you're
90% of it maybe, unless it's a real complicated
Because
verse.
you're saying the
Wow, but that's
critical.
awesome. So you could look and see the manuscript information, for instance, which is, I mean, for
So if I
me,
can
that's something I
understand-
would love.
If I can understand what you're saying, that you're saying critical text.
Yeah, that's
There
that
it is.
manuscript tradition. Is that it?
This right here.
This, right. That exactly. Yes. Which
That's the Greek New Testament.
Oh, wait a minute. In the text about it's written in Greek, or is
Yeah,
that
it's written in
English?
Greek.
So this is the Testament, and then this is the yeah, everything here is, well, some of it's English, but there's a great deal down here that's in Greek.
And it can
Now
tell
that-
you what the
This
variation.
stuff below the
Yeah.
below this line here, this is what do they call it? Textual criticism.
Right.
And
Yeah, the thing I'll have trouble with, which is why that analytical lexicon of the New Testament is so powerful.
yeah,
For me,
it is.
because I'm not going to honestly remember all of these rules.
No, but you know
But
where to find it.
You know, I can go find it in a lexicon. I
Mhm.
would struggle with a simpler lexicon.
Yeah,
So is this?
you'll probably at some point want to get one of those.
Yeah. Fourth revised diction.
Yeah. And if I do it enough, I'll recognize most of the forms.
Mhm.
And in the context of it, if I glance at an English, I'll be able to go, yeah, okay, that must be that word.
Oh, this is yeah, okay. This is exactly what I was talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because this is, I see Kurt Allen here. I just have heard it referred to as Nestle.
Nestle, yeah, Nestle and
Allen.
Allen.
Yeah.
I think that's a 27th edition.
Okay. They're on 28 now or something.
they? Yeah.
Is that one the majority text or this text?
No, the majority text is
the
this
text,
one
not
here.
text.
Okay.
This takes into account the Byzantine manuscript tradition. It's less dependent on like Erasmus.
Here.
Various things.
Here's an interlinear using the majority
that's
text. Let me see.
Without getting into debates about Textus Receptus, it's not.
I don't throw away in my mind. I don't throw away the text. The majority text. I don't think we just because it's.
I'm not
later.
sure those are the same term.
Okay. Well, I don't know either.
Textus Receptus.
Majority. I'm talking about
the Textus Receptus is different from the majority text.
The
in some
majority
cases.
Texts are the ones that from the Byzantine.
Yeah.
Right. No,
Versus
and neither does Nestle Allen. They don't
Alexandria.
throw them away. They
So
take
they
them
keep
into
them
account
and then
along
note.
with the Alexandrian stuff, and they
Fine.
know the
And then
differences.
they know the differences. That's what I've heard.
The Textus Receptus relies more heavily on those Byzantine scripts because that's all that was available around
and
the
they
time.
didn't include
like
the
Erasmus.
differences. You're saying it's missing the difference.
It actually, you know, I think most editions of the Textus Receptus aren't critical editions with all that stuff in there. It's like an agreed text. This
and
is
it's missing the differences with the Alexandrian.
Yeah,
is what I said.
Yeah,
yeah,
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
right.
Which in a good publication, even in the New King James Bible, for example, I imagine it's in the
They
King
do
James,
tell you that stuff.
They tell you what's different.
Yeah, in a footnote.
In the English.
In a footnote, but in the main text, they're translating the Textus Receptus.
That's right. But if you're studying it, you're
that's what he's got here, and they have variations.
In a good interlinear is.
But like ESV is based on the main text in that book.
Yeah.
And new editions are newer editions of that.
And
then they would
footnote NAS is based on.
Yes,
based
also
on
the NASB, right?
Yeah, it's based on
translated differently, but they're based on that.
I understand.
Okay, we've got almost a half an hour left. Do you want to say any more about that study that we looked at last week, or sufficient?
I think it's probably, I think when we talked, I think what we did, we looked, and I didn't bring your book with me, but we looked at some of those verses. Yeah. And actually the one that you brought up just at the beginning of the class about the thorn in the flesh, it was interesting because you commented that as I'm looking at that, I said, well, actually, we don't need to take the word flesh there means the literal flesh, because it might actually be our volition and our tendency to sin, which is and as we talked, I think we agreed that if we look at each verse, there's nuances in well, I agree with you that flesh generally, if you look at it literally, it means the meat on our bones.
Yeah. And if you take that verse to mean that Paul had a physical affliction, that would be using the literal sense of flesh.
Right.
But as Rod explained it, I think I'm being brought more into his understanding that it wasn't necessarily a physical affliction like an eye disease or.
And I think there's room for each verse to discuss that. But the key points are, when we're looking at these, what is it that we understand in general? And I think we came to the same agreements that what the scriptures are clear about as we study them is that in our natural birth, we have a body which is going to die, and we have a spirit which will survive that, but which is dead to God.
Yeah,
which will be separated
and sins.
Yeah, which will be separated from God in eternity,
unless we're born again.
Right, and then we receive new life.
Yeah,
which is called new birth. Which is spiritual, and that spiritual life impacts because it intersects. I want to say intersect. It is in our body. We are a vessel, but I would say there are verses that talk about our life is hidden in Christ. And I take that to mean that look, our spirit's not fully contained in our body.
No, because
it's
the body without the spirit is dead, James says.
That's right. But we have this intersection. I don't know what a better word to call it. In this world, our view of our spirit is through our body. We don't have another way of looking at it except how we behave in our body. And so when we have that new life from God that Jesus talked about, you must be born again. We now know that when we die in this earth, our body will be put in a grave, and we have through Christ the resurrection.
Anastasis. Ana means again.
Again.
Stasis, it means stand again.
Stand again is the actual word.
Yeah, that's the resurrection.
And I would say a new body, but Zach corrects me that the scripture never actually calls it a new body, but it will be a spiritual body. Now it's 1-to-1, and it doesn't matter what happens to this body that we're in. Christ will raise it again as a spiritual body.
I wonder what happens in the case of Siamese twins.
Oh gosh, I don't know. But I think we're in agreement with those terms. And so when we sometimes try to explain things, like I would say it's a new body, I want to be careful to say that in a sense that's how I look at it, but it's not something that doesn't correspond to the body that I have now. It's one for one, and it's recognizable to those who knew me. It, as Christ was in his spiritual resurrected body. And I think that's, if I missed anything, it's really important.
No, I mean, I think the reason I would stress that continuity is because to me it shines a light on the importance that God has placed in the fact that he made us corporeal beings. And so he's going to resurrect the body that he gave us. Very changed. Perfectly agreed. But nonetheless, so I guess that's my thought.
Corporeal, having physicality.
That's pertaining to the body.
Having physicality.
He made us.
Having physicality.
Right. He made Adam and Eve to have physical
we will have
bodies.
Physicality.
And he values the physical bodies that he made. Even destroyed by the ravages of sin in this world and death. He's going to
made in the image of God.
I think there's places where I struggle with, and in that discussion, personally, I struggle with talking about the body having no moral, our physical body having no moral value, if you will.
Well, I'm not
say again how you said it.
It's morally neutral.
And that's right, neutral. I would say not.
The only thing I meant by that is that it's a container for the immaterial, the non-material part of us, and the flesh is how Paul describes that sinful nature that's contained in the body.
And also, though, in this body is a in some part, this body also houses our newborn spirit.
Yeah. I like Romans 12, 1 and 2 in that connection. How's it start? I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your body a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable or rational service.
Right.
Body in that verse can be presented to God, holy and acceptable to him.
I understand. So I want to say that there is a side of this that's really hard to parse out a bit. In having watched a number of people age badly, where their minds go, I knew a man. I won't use the name. I mentioned the name to Zach. He remembered him, but Zach didn't know this. Because of circumstances, I didn't see him in the last 6 months to a year of his life. And at the funeral, his widow told me that that he became senile, or that he lost his mind, became like another man. He was mean and angry and bitter.
And he had not been that way when you knew him.
He was never like that at all.
Shocking to me to think of it.
It was awful for me to hear this. And I've observed this with others too, that they can go through a period. There's lots of ways to talk about and explain what's happening to them materially. Their brains are undergoing a terrible disease, whatever you want to say about it. Their actual brain capacity is diminishing. Things are breaking down. And we'll see in their behaviors outbursts of emotion that they were not normally there before, and a complete inability to process information rationally. And that irrationality results in what appears to be moral fault. They'll make decisions that are terrible. They become impatient, impetuous, really like a very small child that hasn't learned how to behave rightly. And I say that one thing and so the question that brings to me is, I look at that as the falling apart of the physical body And in this case, it's the one through which really our personality and our spirit come through. The brain is falling apart. And so that which had learned, the body part, which had learned to be right, has lost it. So I look at that, and that's why I say I'm not sure the body's completely neutral in this fallen world, because it does impact, in some sense, how our spirit shows through. And I don't know how to judge that, but I would be very reluctant to judge those who age badly. I would not say that it reflects their poor spirit, and finally we're seeing the truth. That would be a terrible thing to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much so. Thank you, Dave. That's very helpful for me to understand where you're coming from. Now, I don't know this person. I don't need to know this person, but when you knew the person in earlier years when his mind was good, was this a believer you're talking about?
Absolutely. He was an elder in our church. He was honestly gentle and kind. He worked with children. He loved children. He loved his wife. His wife was, loved, and he felt loved. And
even as a young child, I remember it's sort of this, just a feeling of being around him.
He exuded
and
love.
Thinking, this is a person who loves Jesus. It's like it just
he
flowed
exudes love. I would characterize him as one who exudes love and shows patience.
Well, I know people like that, and there's one in my family like that. That for years and years, and I'm thinking of somebody not in our family too. In fact, more than one, who it's not because their mind is shot like with Alzheimer's, but these people were once strong Christians, and Christians who were a blessing to others, helped others, and they departed from that willfully. Well, the question arises, were they genuine before and they're not now? And this is a case of apostasy.
They don't reflect it.
We are not permitted by the Lord to make a judgment on a person like that, and it's a good thing we aren't, because we can't judge accurately.
And this is why I think the question's open about the role of the body itself, if you will, the flesh in our sin.
The distinction between the individual or individuals you're talking about and the one that he's talking about is maybe that those individuals made a rational, conscious decision.
Yeah, they did.
And in the case of the individual we're talking about, he never decided that he was going to be that way.
No, he just
his mind
was afflicted with the disease.
He suddenly had.
It seems like the best interpretation of that is that the disease is responsible more for the behavior, really, than his rational deciding.
Well, here's another little nuance of.
So you understand now my not willing to accept the full neutrality of the body in that.
And part of that gets to, and you mentioned also on the other side, very little children, right? I mean, we talk about total depravity, and it's sort of like, I think our bodies do get, you wonder if the nature of original sin is such that even our bodies confront us with desires, that were they, or when they're glorified, I suspect they would not or will not, right? We have a bent towards.
I've never gotten to that point yet. So.
Well, sure. And that was part of my question too. I'm not sure that every sinful desire we have
is entirely
our spirit, our bent soul. Some of it could be an input from our bodies. But when I see the old person, it seems like it must be, that the failing of their body has caused all of these things that we see that we would attribute to if they were rational, would be terrible sin.
Yeah.
Right.
I wonder if we could maybe
So
turn
anyway,
the
thank
recording
you.
off. There's a few
Yeah,
things
sure.
I'd like to
Right.
share with you guys after you turn that off.
Absolutely. So thank you, Carl, for the discussion. I want to
I appreciate
wrap up.
it.
And everybody listening, we're enjoying our discussion, but we're going to move on to something else. So have a good night.
Good night.